Welcome everybody to this breakout session for the Pennsylvania Hemp Summit, exploring best business practices, lessons from CBD, fiber, and beyond. As general housekeeping, please keep muted during the session. Each presenter will have individual time to present. You may submit your questions in the chat feature at the bottom of the screen, and following all presentations, we will address your questions. My name is Brett Goldman, and I will be serving as the moderator for today's panel. Alongside me are Jake Styler and Mac Cheek. So let me set the table a little bit, and then we'll get into the discussion. So today we're going to be discussing the challenges that the hemp industry has faced over the last 18 to 24 months since the 2018 Farm Bill was passed in December 2018. Since then, it's been a bit of a roller coaster or a rocket ship, depending on who you're speaking with. We have seen CBD go from a relatively tangential and obscure cannabis product to a craze likened to POGs or some other next big thing that graces the cover of many mainstream publications. We have seen farmers produce hundreds of thousands of acres of hemp, many having some degree of success, but others without clear markets or buyers because of the speculation spurned by CBD demand. We've also seen some of the best that government innovation has to offer. In just 5 short years, hemp went from an illegal substance to a federally legal and regulated cash crop, yet lacking many of the protections that other commodities might join. Also, you might see a poll pop up on Zoom. Please fill out that poll as you get a chance. There's also been a bit of the dark side to the excitement. There's unscrupulous CBD producers making dangerous products in unregulated environments and like barns and garages. Farmers are struggling to make ends meet. And of course, several high-profile bankruptcies that some see as the harbinger of the end of this industry. That's not true. Secretary Redding once put it so eloquently that hemp is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reset economic possibilities for American farmers. And it's true. There's a lot of opportunity in this industry. So join us and we'll show you what the opportunity is. Going to make a quick introduction of myself. As I said, my name is Brett Goldman, and since 2015, I've been on a mission to create global access to cannabinoids. For the last 6 years, I worked at a company called GenCanna, where I served as Vice President of Government and Industry. I recently left GenCanna, and I'd love to work with you. I have a demonstrated track record of translating the mission of global access to cannabinoids into successful legislative and regulatory policy, and I've worked with the USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service on the development of the agency's interim final rule for hemp production, and the USDA's Risk Management Agency to provide real-time hemp industry data for the development of the first crop insurance program for hemp. I've been very active in the hemp industry, and I've helped launch several of the leading hemp associations, including the US Hemp Roundtable, the US Hemp Growers Association, and I serve on the technical committee for the US Hemp Authority. I'm also on the steering committee for the Hemp Feed Coalition. Some would like to say that working in Kentucky's first hemp vertical gives me some unique qualifications and perspective on the industry, and that's certainly true. And couple that with my previous career in politics, not a whole lot surprises me anymore. Prior to joining GenCanna, I worked as a lobbyist at a multinational law firm in Philadelphia, where I worked on federal, state, and local legislative and regulatory campaigns, and I started my career working in politics. So with that, Jake and Mac, would you guys like to introduce yourselves, and then I'll set the table?
Sure. Do you want to start, Mac, or you want me to start?
You go ahead, Jake.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jake Sittler. I work right now as partner at Floyd's of Leadville. I also run my side agency, JW Innovators, and we are a CBD company, and we started in Colorado, and now we grow here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I was a one-time professional cyclist that was hit by a motor vehicle who ran a red light and ended up almost paralyzing me, which led me into the CBD space. And my wife was also an autistic school teacher And we saw a lot of benefits with her students with the cannabis. So when things kind of ended in my professional career for cycling, I ended up approaching Floyd Landis, who won the Tour de France. You may have heard of him. And we started a CBD company. So here we are, 2020. It's been a wild ride since our initial starting back in, well, really we got into business around 2018, but my main goal was getting up the supply chain for our Lancaster County. So we have an extraction facility about 3 minutes down the road from me. And we grew the product line from maybe 500 to 1,000 bike shops to we're in about 10,000 retail locations now. And we have an e-commerce website. And then from that standpoint, on the side, I do a lot of formulations for some major CBD companies, and I help some smaller ones just kind of with business development and stuff like that. But yeah, generally speaking, it's been definitely not a straight path, and we've learned a lot, and there's been a lot of ups and downs in the industry, and we're excited to kind of share some of that with you today.
Good afternoon, gang. I'm Mac Cheek from EcoFiber, and with me is Mark Sunderland. I am a vice president of sales here, and Mark is our chief innovation officer. Luckily for us today, we're both here in Kentucky at our new Leeds Platinum facility that was just opened earlier this year in the middle of all this mess that we've got going on. We not only have a LEED Platinum office building here, but we've got all our manufacturing also on the site. Thank you, guys.
So I'm going to share a couple of brief slides just to set the table for where we're at in the industry here in December 2020. Just bear with me for one moment while I share my screen. Okay, so legalization and regulation of cannabis or hemp has come quite a long way especially in the last 7 years. We often think about the stereotypes of legalization, tie-dye, marijuana leaves, legalize it, man, all that sort of thing. That's really been upended in the last couple of years because in 2014, Congress gave hemp to farmers. We've been at the vanguard of legalization ever since hemp was legalized in Section 7606 of the 2014 Farm Bill, and again in 2018 during the 2018 Farm Bill. For now, hemp is the only federally legal segment of cannabis, and I want to define a couple terms as we get into this because it's really important that we know what we're talking about. So cannabis exists in many forms in 2020. We have recreational marijuana, we have medical marijuana, we have hemp, and we have cannabinoids. I like to tell people that cannabis equals hemp plus marijuana. So sometimes throughout this presentation, I might use hemp and cannabis interchangeably. I'm only speaking about hemp for now. If I'm talking about marijuana, I'll be clear to indicate that. So the term hemp means the plant Cannabis sativa L and any part of that plant, including the seeds, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomers, whether growing or not, with a delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol concentration of not more than 0.3% THC. So when Congress legalized hemp in 2014, they did the very important task of defining hemp as Cannabis sativa L with less than 0.3% THC. That has made all the difference in the world for the entire hemp industry. Marijuana is cannabis with more than 0.3% delta-9 THC. That includes all recreational and medical marijuana. It's important that we keep these two distinctions at the front of mind because, well, this is how it's been demarcated over the last 7 years. Will that change in the future? Yes. Are we going to talk about that today? Maybe a little bit, but we'll get into that shortly. Cannabinoid, also very important term for everybody on the call to understand. This is a definition of cannabinoid that is from the U.S. Hemp Authority's standard. I urge you all to check that out. And there are more than 22 cannabinoids, certainly, but for the purpose of this definition, we're only thinking of 22, but there are hundreds. And then rec is, of course, adult use or recreational cannabis, and MMJ is, of course, medical marijuana. So I want to just take a minute for everyone to understand the scope and scale of legalization right now in 2020. I've broken this down into two separate areas, the United States and the rest of the world. And this is very important because on all of these fronts, things are evolving right now. So at the top, what I would consider the most important regulator for hemp and cannabinoids in the US is the FDA. Many, including myself, will point to the FDA as being one of the main barriers to economic stability for the hemp industry. When hemp was legalized in 2018, there was an expectation that the regulatory framework defined or mandated in the 2018 Farm Bill for the FDA would be quick to roll out like their counterparts at the USDA, but that hasn't happened yet. As you see in my slide, the FDA continues to disappoint the hemp industry and slow mainstream access to hemp-derived products because they have not issued regulations or guidelines just yet. Over the summer, they released a guidelines for clinical research, but that only addressed pharmaceutical research and really pharmaceutical interests for cannabis products and CBD products. That being said, a path for CBD into food or beverages and even dietary supplements remains unclear. We're expecting that a bill that was released by a bipartisan group of lawmakers in the fall, HR 8179, will authorize the use of hemp-derived CBD as a dietary supplement. And we're expecting that companion legislation in the Senate will take that a little bit further and define CBD as a food or beverage ingredient. This will make all the difference in the world when it comes to commercialization of our products. We're also seeing some states move forward with their own regulations. Last month, the state of New York issued guidelines for cannabinoids, hemp-derived cannabinoids, and included a 25 milligram serving size for hemp-derived CBD and other cannabinoids into food, beverages, and dietary supplements. This is in line with some things that we'll see in Europe, and I'll get into that momentarily. One of the bright spots from the developments over the last 2 years is the USDA. The USDA worked very collaboratively with the industry to develop the interim final rule for hemp. Mandated in the 2018 Farm Bill was crop insurance, and the USDA's risk management agency worked diligently with myself and many others, both in Kentucky and elsewhere in the industry, to quickly develop this program and provide farmers with a little bit of a backstop for the risk that they're taking when it comes to producing this new crop. One of the big issues that we've had over the last year is the extension of the provisions in the 2014 Farm Bill. So there are essentially two tracks under the USDA right now. You have research and commercial. Commercial would be everything under the 2018 Farm Bill, while research is everything under the 2014 Farm Bill. And there was quite a bit of pushback from state ag regulators, to extend those 2014 provisions. We're also expecting when the new Congress takes office for there to be legislation and possibly regulation addressing processing for hemp products. So right now, USDA's regulations are everything from cultivation to the farm gate. And we're hoping that there will be some guidelines put in place regarding processing. The rest of the hemp industry, as I mentioned earlier, is almost forgot the DEA. The DEA issued an interim final rule in August, and it concerned many over a work in process hemp extract. There's a very high profile lawsuit happening at the moment with HIA and RE Botanicals suing the DEA over this. One bright spot to keep in mind is that there has been no enforcement action from the DEA, and we're expecting that they're more concerned with the opioid crisis than they are with hemp. So expect some legislation coming down the pike, and hopefully that will not be the problem that many expect it to be. The hemp industry as it stands now remains cannabinoid focused and fractured. There aren't many dominant brands, and there's likely going to be consolidation going into 2021 and 2022. There are standards that are evolving. As I mentioned, the US Hemp Authority, highly recommend checking that out. And the fiber and the protein segments of the industry are gaining traction quickly. You'll notice that I included a line in here that there's convergence between MJ and hemp coming, and that's exactly true. Hopefully there will be a path for farmers to participate in the marijuana ecosystem, or at least sell hemp-derived ingredients into that ecosystem. Time will tell. Quickly looking at the rest of the world, the United Nations, I'm sure everybody on this call is aware of the UN's vote at the CND last week, where they removed cannabis from one of the most restrictive schedules. This is largely symbolic for the US, but it is likely to spur international activity on cannabis cultivation and processing, especially in countries where they hold UN treaties in high regard. So keep an eye out for that. In the United Kingdom, CBD is considered a novel food regulated by the Food Standards Agency. They're going to move forward a version of novel food certification post-Brexit. And according to myself and some colleagues, we see the UK as one of the most advanced international markets right now. The European Union had suspended novel food status for non-synthetic CBD products in early June, but last week, actually the same day as the UN vote, reversed that decision. So they're going to allow for CBD as a novel food. The fact that they have allowed for hemp-derived CBD as a food will certainly drive growth in the European market. To our south in Latin America, Brazil and Argentina are signaling evolution to begin to match various developments in Uruguay, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. And as the UN treaty, as concerns from the UN treaty subside, expect more evolution in Latin America. And then in the rest of the world, Africa, Asia, and the rest of Europe are going to move towards more open cannabis policies, likely in a slightly more slower fashion, but they're coming. And now is the opportunity for American farmers to catch up or get left out. One more slide. I think I've covered most of this at this point, but we're right now through a multi-year process to bring a formerly controlled substance into the existing food and beverage and dietary supplement frameworks. That's going to take some time. We've always known this is going to take work. From 2014 and 2018 to development of regulations in 2019, we've been clearly impacted by less demand than anticipated. And again, that can be traced back to lack of regulations defining a path for food and for CBD in food and beverages. Many in the industry, farmers, feel like they've been a part of a quagmire. Many thought that this was going to happen quickly, but it's been a lot slower. And couple more points, and then we'll get on to the panel. The present reality of the FDA is to enforce against medical claims and not quality. And this is really important to keep in mind because there are fewer CBD products now than there might have been a year ago being made in basements and barns and in non-safe environments. But quality matters, and quality is going to continue to matter, especially as CPG, consumer packaged goods, gets into the industry, and the American Food Incorporated or American Food Inc., the food industry. I think that there's a lot of hope with the new administration coming in for full legalization, regulation, and normalization. But again, these things are going to take time, and the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic has put a lot of strain not only on our industry but many other industries, and has taken that priority that some had for hemp and taken it elsewhere. So I think there's a lot to look forward to, but there's also a lot of challenges that have been in our way, and I'm happy to answer any questions when we do the Q&A. But I'd like to turn this back over to our panelists here. So let's get started here. Mac and Jake and Mark as well. Welcome. We have a unexpected fourth panelist. So in hemp's limited recent history in the U.S., CBD has been the driving force. First up, then down. We saw $5,000 kilograms of CBD 3 years ago, and now I hear that isolate is hovering between $400 and $500 a kilo. So what do you guys see as happening next? What's your outlook for 2020? And I think I also forgot that you guys were supposed to have a little intro, or Jake, you had an intro. So you want to answer that question, and then you can do your thing. My apologies.
Sure. Well, I'll start us off. So yeah, I guess at this point it's been interesting, right? We really went from a brand perspective of a buyer of cannabinoids at this high value that you had just mentioned, probably in early 2018. And then I think what had happened is we saw what everyone saw was, okay, well, we are from Lancaster community. We're very familiar with this area. It's an incredible agricultural area. Pennsylvania had not grown hemp other than limited pilot programs up until that point. So going into the 2019 season, we were, I think everyone was moving as fast as possible, right? It's like, how fast can we create a supply chain that never existed in the past? So what we did was, really, it was just put out some ads in Lancaster farming. And then we got a group of farmers and interested parties that seemed to have, vegetable growing experience, had used organic practices, et cetera, et cetera. And then we brought in about 55 acres worth of seeds, which we had purchased through Oregon CBD and HGH out in Colorado. And then as per contract, we gave these seeds to our farmers. So that was part of the agreement, was we were going to give them the seeds. And then upon extraction, we would work out a payment structure. So, in full transparency, what happened was during this, we're growing and getting a collective co-op of group of people to farm. We're sending, at this point, we had very limited resources of 2 employees to go to the farms and walk these farmers how to grow hemp. And then, we were very successful. I think if you were in the Northeast in 2019, the grow was tremendous. We had incredible weather. This is one of our fields on my background. They were huge plants. It was way beyond we had ever seen in Colorado, and we thought we were really onto something. As the harvest was coming in 2019, I think everyone started to get a little concerned, because more and more people had talked about, hey, we've got all this biomass. Where do we go with it? And at this point, our facility hadn't been up and running yet. We were running into a little bit of delays. So our only option was, okay, well, how do you dry 55 acres? So unless every single farmer that you had worked with had some sort of drying experience in hemp, which none had at that point, we came up with a solution. We were going to try to cryogenically freeze all of our hemp. So we ended up taking 55 acres worth. It was delivered in bags, and then we cryogenically, it ended up being almost 55 employees nonstop for 3 weeks straight to do 55 acres. And we put it into frozen storage. I think this gets us to our first big things that you do and things you don't. And that was a big, it worked and it preserved our hemp perfectly, but it was a don't in the long term. But we got through that. We preserved our hemp, and then we were able to get our extraction facility running, and then we had to obviously dry the hemp then to process. So, input costs were much, much higher than we had ever anticipated. And also during this exact time, the market was falling out from underneath of us. So when we had thought we would be able to get anywhere from a few thousand or at least 1,000 a kilo of distillate or more, it dropped dramatically. So the only thing that was keeping us afloat at this point was our brand. So I think you've heard probably in the past, vertical integration is going to be key in this industry, because if one segment of the market is suffering, you can have other aspects that maybe can help you along. So at this point, we get through 2019, we're starting to process, we're picking up slowly, we're supplying to ourselves, well, not slowly, we're supplying to ourselves, and then we're picking up some external customers, which was our goal for their extract needs. And we actually are producing for some larger companies now, but sadly, between all of that, COVID then struck, and then that gave its own set of problems. The retail market, it not just, and when I say retail, actual physical stores, we went from a growth trajectory and opening retail locations at a rapid rate, and some of them had launched CBD in 3,000 stores the same month COVID struck, and frankly, it was abysmal in some of these launches. I mean, if you don't have the right positioned retail brand, I think everyone had seen CBD all over the United States, that, some of these channels weren't the right place to be selling. Some were wins, some were losses. But general foot traffic in physical retail locations diminished rapidly anyway. So then we had to deal with that. So, we're not even close to through this maze of navigating this market. It's I guess a long game, as everyone says, but as far as where we're at now, we're now in a 2020 harvest. We definitely reduced our number of farmers. The contracts look differently, and frankly, we're not doing tolling because farmers don't have anywhere to take it. I mean, I think everyone knows that if there's extract right now, if you don't have connections, you're not moving it. And that's the big elephant in the room, is just this massive oversupply of extract. And who's got what, and where did that chain of custody come from, and what's that look like? So, I'll pause there, and I think if we can get more into some, I'll let Max speak for a bit, and then I do have a little bit of a slide, but I might have talked through most of it. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at, and I'll pass it back to you, Mac.
Jake, my apologies you didn't get to do your slides, but hopefully
it's actually okay. I mean, honestly, the slides were pretty much what I covered, but I can always pull them up for reference later.
I hate doing slides anyway, and yeah. I kind of wish we were all in person, right?
Exactly.
Just make all this easier. So Mac, go ahead. Sorry.
Perfect. We'll be short and sweet, and then be able to take plenty of questions. But one thing I wanted to do was tell everybody in the audience a little bit about our company, because you might not know us. We are a multinational company headquartered in Sydney, Australia, and in Georgetown, Kentucky, where Mark and I are right now. We went about the hemp business from the ground up using our own seeds, and now we're cloning our product here in Kentucky. We started our business to be more like a pharmaceutical business than like a corner store of CBD. We do produce full spectrum hemp extract here, and we use it in many health, food, and new technology businesses. Our company believes that one of the many sharp things we did was we got the farmers here in Kentucky and in North Carolina to trust us in everything we were doing. We built a factory here in the multi-million-dollar facility here in the middle of Kentucky. And between focusing on our farmers and the independent pharmacies around the country, which there are about 20,000 of them, we believe that trust in our Ananda Health products is strong and is going to continue to grow. As Jake said earlier, a brand really means something today in this mess that we've got here in the US, and we're living proof that a brand does matter. We have 3 different divisions. One is a food division, which Brett talked about a little bit, that food could be an emerging market. We are doing nice things with food additives in Australia, not here yet, but eventually we will. Here in Kentucky, we make all of our CBD products from what I'll term a lower end salve to a 2,000 milligram tincture right here in this facility that we're proud of. What else, Mark? Let me, before Mark gets on, one of the things that we're growing and is a real highlight of our future is using hemp inputs from the hemp plant into other technology fields that we've got a lot of experience and knowledge in. Mark is our chief innovation officer, and we'll let him talk a little bit about some of those, because we see the future not only in the pharmaceutical business, but in some of the things we're learning about the hemp extract and what the plant can give us in other areas.
Yeah, so let me just thank everybody who's part of the panel, who's on this call, who's on this Zoom meeting. I appreciate your efforts and certainly your passion around the hemp industry, specifically, in Pennsylvania. And we're only in the infancy, of course, but so Hemp Black is a division of EcoFiber. EcoFiber is a publicly traded company, both on the NASDAQ and the Australian stock market. Hemp Black is derived from a name that I had come up with to sort of drive hemp in a different direction, to get hemp away from that scratchy, crunchy, I'm gonna smoke my t-shirt kind of hemp. And all of our technologies are built on trying to find the assets inside the hemp plant that will give us products that we would normally not consider to be hemp-driven products, but you can go to the Hemp Black website, of course, sorry for the cheap plug, where all of our products are showcased there and all of our technologies. Hemp Black was born from research that I did at Thomas Jefferson University. We are now under 7 patents in our hemp technology, from biocarbons to hemp extract and textiles. We plan to compete with some of the best antimicrobial companies developing textiles in the world, and we have proven our technology works on the highest of platforms. We are also going through regulatory bodies to get our materials certified through the EPA. That's very important to us. But what we're finding is from textiles, from high functioning polymers to performance materials, really started at research. And that's one of the things that we do here extremely well. We do research, we do a lot of studies. You mentioned the opioid crisis, where we actually did an observational study using CBD and taken over time across a study of individuals who suffered from opioid abuse and saw a reduction in their abuse based on their intake of CBD over an extended period of time. So our studies and our research, we think, is very strong, and it's obviously has proven itself in the patents that we've allowed to garner. We do want to find partners in the industry that certainly have the same kind of messaging and trust and transparency that we do. Our Hemp Black Carbon, which we call Eco 6, was cradle to cradle certified as the first platinum carbon. That speaks extremely well for the hemp plant and what it gives back to us and its sustainability factors. So we understand what the market is bringing when we're trying to hit all those customer experiences and bring hemp along with it. We understand the foes, we understand the barriers that are against us. There's no doubt about it. The market is flooded with CBD products right now, but our research and our technology and the way in which we can highlight the assets of CBD inside our own facility. We are completely vertical now. Ecofiber purchased a plant in Greensboro, North Carolina that produces much of our materials and performance textiles using hemp. And so we are a completely vertical operation. That's why during COVID, we were able to go inside 4 weeks. We were able to go with our hemp black based face mask from concept to consumer inside of 4 weeks time, as we are producing our own textiles with our full hemp extract CBD in it. The genetics are very important to us, so we're able to create genetics in Australia that will advance performance properties later on in the growing and then the harvesting and the use of those technologies. So we find that to be a very powerful statement. And if we can clone those technologies here, which we have been doing, then we can get hemp that is the same each and every time. And that's certainly important to an industry that requires fluidity, and not only fluidity, but requires stabilization when it comes to the products and to the consumer, that they know what they're getting is true. So, you can, from our face products to our food, to our textiles, we've covered a big range of products. And right now Mac and I are delivering this message to everybody who supports the hemp industry. We are delivering this message in our gallery wall, which highlights all of our products here in Kentucky. We even have the history of hemp in Kentucky here, where Mitch McConnell, who supports the hemp industry here in Kentucky, was able to come and see the wall for himself. So there's a lot going on. Certainly for us, there's a lot of marketplace. We believe we were pioneers in these markets. No one was obviously there, and we found opportunities. But the research at Jefferson was the start, and Ecofiber was doing medical research on CBD at Jefferson. And then when Thomas Jefferson and Philadelphia University merged, I came on the project on the industrial hemp side, as well as a team of other professors did. But Hemp Black came out of that project as the commercial entity. And we're very excited for the launch of its products. It's been a long road. Certainly, as Jake has said, you're shifting from apparel products. Now we are shifting to, our line of Hemp Black products is around personal protection, right? And 99.9% antibacterial, using a green material. That is a statement unto itself that is extremely viable in the market when people are looking to be clean, greener, and safer. So there's a lot going on for us, but you just have to be entrepreneurial every day. You can't think of, what you did 10 minutes ago is going to hold true for the future 10 minutes. So, and it all comes at a cost, right? The business model and the cost of goods and how you build a product all has to have a business platform that makes sense to the consumers. So if we're building our hemp technology and we're selling, a product for $20, we know that we have to make profit on that, right? There's a business model that goes into that. But being able to control and be vertical in this space is very much an asset for us at Ecofiber, in our Ananda products, and in Hemp Black.
So what Mark touched base on one of the technologies that we're working on, and right in between us, you can see a wall that's 20 foot high that's showing some pellets, some yellow and black pellets. Those pellets are actually recycled nylon and polyester that we have infused full spectrum hemp extract in for us to make fiber and films and other things that are antimicrobial and antibacterial permanently in some of the things we do. So we believe in research. We spend a lot of money on it, and we believe in the technology going forward for many years to come.
Well, thank you for that. Mark, you might want to put yourselves on mute. There's a bit of echo coming from you guys. Thank you. So I just want to make one point about something that Mark said. Ecofiber has the distinction, both the Ecofiber and Gencana have the distinction of getting Leader McConnell to do some firsts when it comes to hemp. 2 years ago, we got, about a year and a half ago, we got Leader McConnell to say the words CBD for the first time at our facility. But just as important, if not more importantly, now under the pandemic, Ecofiber actually got McConnell to wear a hemp mask. So congratulations on that, guys. So I want to jump back into some questions, and I encourage the audience to put questions in the chat box. But Mac, Mark, Jake, can you guys speak a little bit about what regulators have done over, especially in the last year since the market compression started and the pandemic began, to help hemp growers and processors, and what more do you think can be done? There was a major loss to the hemp industry at the beginning of the pandemic when hemp farmers were left out of CFAP, which is the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, or the Ag Stimulus. But what do you see? What else do you think can be done, and how have they been helpful in the last while?
Yeah, guess I can start us off. I mean, one thing I didn't mention, I actually am on a steering member for a market and supply chain outreach for the PA Department of Agriculture. So that's been a nice little fun thing to do here in the Commonwealth, is kind of steer PA and the policies that we create. I would say with the slow rolling of FDA regulation and confusion, states have done a fantastic job of coming up with regulations and policies to help. Maybe not as much at a retail perspective. I think from a farming perspective is where all this has started, which is, the Farm Bill, right? It all started from that avenue. I think we need to take a little bit of a different approach and start looking more so from a retail perspective, because at the end of the day, the retail product is what's going to help. And regardless, whatever that retail product is, whether it's CBD products, hemp black, making awesome athleisure, athleisure. Did I say that right? Athleisure. Athleisure. You just got to make some cycling kits and I'll try them out. But anyway, from that standpoint, I think if we can make regulations to make retailers and large consumers, the big box brands, the big box stores and the large e-commerce channels more comfortable moving in this direction, we've already got a good guideline from the farming side to help navigate that. I think we can then sway that momentum. And a lot of this is all because everyone's just waiting on the FDA. But what I'm finding is as states make regulations and impose guidelines, I work with a lot of Department of Agricultures all across the United States, and they're very, very unique. Utah has their own set of regulations. Florida has their own sort of regulations. And when I say regulations, I mean from a retail packaging perspective that a brand has to follow.
Kind of like California.
Exactly. California, these major states that have huge, huge economies, when they make the regulations and I think if they're good regulations that can help the comfortability within those markets, you're going to see an uptick of, of brand development. You're going to see an uptake of sales in whether it's CBD products or fiber products. I guess it's, a little less regulatory, but So yeah, from that perspective, I think as the states continue to put their focus more in that avenue, I think we are going to see a turnaround of businesses, and farmers are going to get at the end. And you hope, if you have good business practices and you are a good company, you want to take care of those farmers. I do believe there's a lot of really good people out there. You know, our intention was to pay the farmers true market value, and sadly that market value is horrible. But our intention is to bring everyone into this supply chain that is appropriate for everybody, and everyone gets that dollar amount. Sadly, at this point, it's come to, I believe, the farmer has gotten the short end of the stick. The brands that started and failed, you know, they got the short end of the stick. You know, processors are struggling right now because the extract movements, they're getting the short end of the stick because there's no real regulation on some of this distillate going out. You know, the DEA comes out with these rulings, and then that causes massive confusion. And then some people are turning CBD isolate into Delta 8, and it's like, is that even legal? And then, you know, from that perspective, it's that hurts processors, which when the extract market's low, yes, brands that can capitalize on a lower, you know, extract, but I don't think that's long-term longevity. I don't think the market can go any lower. And if it does, it would. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I don't know what will happen if the market goes lower, but it's not going to be good.
So Jake, follow-up question, and Mac and Mark, please feel free to chime in. Is that why you see that? Is that why you feel that there's no dominant brands in hemp, and maybe take that to cannabis as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think what creates a dominant brand, right? It's getting in front of a consumer. I mean, we know that, right? You know, you walk in, let's just say you walk into a convenience store, you walk into a Walmart, you walk into where you shop, you walk into a grocery store, a Whole Foods, a Wegmans, a whatever. When you walk in, brands are all over the place and you see them. Right now, CBD companies that are e-commerce driven, they have to navigate an ad market that is stacked against them. They have to do appropriate advertising, SEO, Google advertising, et cetera, that has the chain and shackle on them, essentially. You know, you can't just spend money in advertising and get people to your brand. You can't make claims, you know, you can't do this, and this. So, you know, from our standpoint, we came up with the idea, like, all right, let's come up with a low price CBD product, get it in front of the consumer, get them associated with their brand. It works for them. Then let them come back to us. We were pretty successful in doing that at a convenience level with some great partners around. You know, Sheetz has been awesome for us. Sheetz has done a very good job with their education component. We don't want to just go, I know everyone says gas station CBD, and I understand that. I get why people feel that way, but you walk into a Sheetz, you can also buy a Red Bull. You can also buy an Arizona tea. You can also buy, these are real big brands. So at some point, I think that's the goal of CBD companies, is to be a household brand.
Jake, Sheetz and Wawa are their own category. Let's not forget that. So. Okay,
that is a fair point, actually.
And they're two Pennsylvania companies.
That's right.
They were both born in the Commonwealth.
That is right.
But one of the things when you talk about when we say a pharmaceutical type brand, we're in about 6,000 independent pharmacies in the country and about 9,800 CVSs. So we see real education, particularly of the pharmacists and the employees in there, as very important, not just our research, but also how we project that to the pharmacies around the country.
Yeah, we are the first CBD branded product across a lot of our product is in face creams and eye creams, a lot of cosmetics under our Balance Labs name, which is in 9,800 CVS pharmacies across the country. That started in November 1st, so it started during the pandemic, but the production for CVS started over the summer. They will be visual end cap displays in CVS stores, so they'll be brand approved. They'll be in the center. You know how you walk into a CVS, everything goes on an angle, kind of contours towards back to the pharmacy, so you get to see all the products at one time, and we will be on that center aisle. So I think that, I'm not saying that, there's one dominant brand over another, but certainly what we are, let me just tell you from the consumer standpoint and how the consumer views and how the consumer can get to CBD products. Not many people understand that, does Amazon sell CBD, right? No one understands that. Like, even when we have a product like a mask and we put it on our own website and we use Shopify as the platform, how we have to convince Shopify that our mask is not CBD, right? That our mask has CBD technology in it, right? And people just don't understand. The regulations are always going to be there and we have to navigate through them.
And this is also, sorry, I was going to say, this is also why standards matter.
Yeah, this is why standards matter. And, that was our first, like, all of a sudden people are trying to buy our mask and it's not, the transaction's not going anywhere because Shopify or that our platform picked up, oh, it says hemp in the description on our website, right? So, and we had to convince them of such, and that was, that was a lot of heartache. But we have to navigate that all the time, how the products sell, how they appear on the website. Our website is a pure, it's very orchestrated to the language that we use, right? So that we can highlight all the great things that happen in hemp and highlight our products, but it's orchestrated in a way that allows us to speak to hemp assets and not get caught behind the iron curtain where somebody's trying to buy something and they can't because somebody's found the word hemp somewhere. And it's really very difficult. It goes well beyond. You can build, you can build your farm, Jake, and you can build your CBD extract facility, but then somebody's building your website to try to find the platform to sell it on, and all of a sudden, that's a whole set of different animal, but yet you got this great product. So how do you tell people about it in a way that is meaningful and that the customer knows? It's not so easy.
He's exactly right. I mean, from our perspective, we were just super fortunate because we did it all of our story, right? What's the story? Our niche market is endurance sports. I mean, if we didn't have the cycling community, we wouldn't have ever risen to this brand. That's where we were fortunate to have a name. Floyd Landis won the Tour de France. You can look up that story. We have probably 4 professional cyclists that were, including myself, that work in the company. I was after Floyd. I was the next professional cyclist to come out of Lancaster County. About 10 years later, I raced in Europe and all across internationally, Australia, all over China. Fun times. But like I said, my accident led me to my story, and our story is what's grown our brand. Endurance recovery products for athletes. I think that's been our biggest push, is just pushing that story out there. And because we had access to bike shops, and frankly, bike shops, they don't have big processing systems. They don't have they're not like thousands of stores. They don't have massive insurance policies. Right. These were just a bunch of guys that were like, oh, you mean we're going to sell that in our store and okay, let's try it. And it was successful for them for a long time. I mean, it worked really well for them. They became users of the product. Then they passed it on to their buddies and then they used it. And for us, that is why we were able to penetrate and navigate this market. Frankly, at this point, to start a brand, I would be, without a good story and a good niche market, it's hard to, you're not going to just come in and lead this industry right now. It's just not going to happen.
You're absolutely right. And if I may ask a follow-up question, in the last month, we've seen medical and adult use cannabis becoming increasingly popular with voters. I think the big winner in the last election was cannabis. But the population might be more confused, and the political leadership is clearly confused. But there's a clear desire to have more access for cannabis and cannabis products, including hemp, including the stuff that we all make. How do you see this impacting our business?
Yeah, I mean, from a regulatory, from the law stating it's a law, I think that's great, and it loosens the handcuffs, so to speak. But in the end, I think as consumers, we were already there. our mind, it's almost like, oh, cannabis is not legal, or now we have to pass a law to make that happen, right? So I think as consumers, we were already there. I think it just loosens the handcuffs a bit. The cannabis market and the hemp market are, they're lovers and haters at the same time, so, and, they really can certainly, coexist. But, the hemp market, you might have talked about this in a previous session, Brett, but, quite frankly, people don't really always understand the difference between, we have the hemp for the nutraceutical side and we have hemp for fiber.
That's why I made a slide.
Yeah. So, and I know that a lot of the hemp farmers in Pennsylvania were very geared up for, producing the hemp fiber. And I can tell you, being in the textile and fiber industry, as Mac will tell you, hemp is a very, very, very difficult fiber to get off the plant. And in this day and age, all the great sustainability data that we have built around growing hemp and using less water and no irrigation and growing this great crop is all lost when you try to harvest the hemp in fiber
And put it into textiles.
and putting it into textiles. And there's no obvious asset to why you would use hemp versus like cotton or wool in this day and age right now. Plus, just growing hemp fiber just is not enough. The hemp fiber, there needs to be a consortium of hemp farmers if they wish to grow fiber. So the fiber needs to be classified. It needs to be classified for yield. It needs to be classified for fineness. It needs to be classified for length, because that's the only way then you can take those classifications and drive a market or drive a market set. So just the same way the cotton industry did it 30, 40 years ago, cotton is classified across a broad range as wool, and every sheep is classified. So you don't use in wool carpeting, you don't use that in a cashmere sweater, right? I mean, because that has been classified. So,
and that's what, sorry.
No, so classification is, if we're trying to get hemp fiber into all these great products and hempcrete and these materials, and there needs to be a way to classify it, because the classifier can't be in the customer.
And that's one of the things that was really missing from the USDA's interim final rule, was a grading system for hemp, similar to every other crop. And I'm interested to get both of your, or all three of your takes on this, but I think that's part of the reason why the industry is not ready for, a traditional like checkoff program or something like that. We still don't have the right way to classify and quantify crops. I mean, we've all seen really good hemp crops, and I'm sure we've all seen really, poor looking hemp crops.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you can, after you do an analysis, either a spectral analysis or a chemical analysis of the hemp, even coming off from two different fields 4 miles away, you will find that the analysis of the hemp and also of the minerals or heavy metals or the PAHs in the hemp plant itself vary differently. So, as you know, hemp has been used as a remediation crop for many years over chemical spills, Chernobyl. It's ungodly because it takes from the earth all that bad stuff and keeps it for itself.
And that's also why standards matter.
Correct. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
because all that stuff shows up in extracts.
correct.
Yes.
And I think, to go back to your point of the cannabis market, right? I think it's a big what if, and what if is going to happen in the way that you can assume, and we can assume that if federal legalization of marijuana, what does that framework end up looking like? And what does the regulation of CBD products end up looking like? But let's just say there's clear lanes, but there's still, as you had mentioned before, maybe these extracts from CBD products can be put into marijuana products, right? Because there is one thing for certain. If federal legalization happened right now, it would be pretty safe to assume that no state would be, unless you've already had a recreational program, you're not going to be up and running for another year or two or longer, right? We know that. But the hemp market as it's developing, can then combine some resources, whether it's from minor cannabinoid product development that then is infused into some cannabis products. Because look, we're getting it into an extract industry right now. People are doing 10-to-1 profiles, they're doing 10-to-1 products. Those products aren't naturally made in a hemp product. They're coming from mother liqueurs with THC remediation. They're coming from isolation techniques and then combinations of these isolates. We're actually getting into nutraceuticals and pharmaceutical combinations at that point. So, there's got to be some sort of regulation on that, because no one knows what this minor at this level is going to do to somebody. That's not natural anymore. We're not just talking a basic extract from a plant.
Exactly right. And I think the hemp industry has been well positioned to at least alleviate some of the challenges on the extract side of things. But think about, look, I'm an MJ patient in Pennsylvania, and sometimes it's damn near impossible to get flower. Most of that flower that's being produced by, your MSOs and whatnot goes right into both extracts and smokables. It might make sense at some point in the future for those ingredients for extracts to be sourced from hemp farmers. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
100%. And yep. No, and just one thing I wanted to add that you guys had said, a situation that we've been rising is let's talk about what's coming on the farm. Let's talk about, organic grow practices and why people stress it. I don't think people realize, and I got to give it to the California market. The California lab testing, we use California labs for testing our hemp now because they have imposed such strict, heavy metals and testing on essentially any sort of sprays and pesticides. It is really important. I mean, just from what I've seen that can come into hemp, you may think that you have a clean farm and you would be shocked as to what hemp can actually pick up at a CB level when it is diluted down from, it's not going to show up in your flower. When you send it off for testing, it's not going to show up. But when you dilute that whole entire acre into an extract, you better be certain that that was clean organic soil or it's going to show up. And that go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you're going to see, you're going to see what that farmer put on their field 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen it show up in our paralysis. We carbonize hemp here. We carbonize hemp biomass here. That hence the name hemp black too, right? Mm-hmm. So we under paralysis at 1100 C, and then doing analysis, it still shows up. I mean,
we have a ton of fun with that hemp carbon, by the way. It's like, you can put it in your hand and it becomes like immediately like you could like make a ball out of it and then just explode it on the ground if you
want. So we've got a couple of questions coming in from the audience, but I want to throw one more out there to you guys before we take audience questions. So audience, please send some more questions. The U.S. Is definitely the leader in floral hemp and cannabis. So flower products and what have you. And the recent steps by the UN in rescheduling cannabis and the EU confirmation of CBD as food would seem to have a little effect on our issues here in the US. But why does the rest of the cannabis world matter? Why do you see the rest of the cannabis world mattering?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I mean, I think it matters just because let's be honest, if you've ever used it, it is medicine. And I think it matters for everyone in the entire globe. I think we've had, if you call it prohibition or just from what it's done from my life. And this probably isn't even from a business perspective, but it's more of a personal one. I think from how it saved me from not having to use heavy opiates or not having to use heavy medications to treat some major injuries I've had in my life. I think it is something that we should be looking at it from a global perspective. And I do believe that it is a crop that can change things medicinally for us very rapidly, very quickly, when we can actually get true research into what it can do and how it can, improve a lot of people's lives. I think, we look at countries like Jamaica, we look at countries that are big farming, Jamaica, Latin America, South America. They have great soil, they have great infrastructure, they're very good farmers. Jobs, I mean, it can bring jobs at an international level for a lot of people, and then they can self-sustain that market within their own communities. It doesn't necessarily have to be an import export. So yeah, it's just brief, but I think as a whole, it's gonna help everybody.
Mac, Mark, you guys are on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. You had something to add to that? No, I think Jake covered it.
So there's a question from one of our listeners. Is the industry short on the number of processors, and what do you see as the biggest bottleneck? And if there is a shortage of processors, is that restricted to a regional area? Is that a logistics or a distribution cost issue? And are more processing facilities a good step to eliminate the bottleneck?
Yeah. I don't think more processing facilities at this point are going to eliminate the bottleneck. I think it's a lack of actual consumer, the market, the CBD market in general. I believe from a retail perspective, it's the bottleneck. And maybe that's because of an oversupply. I think it's going to be time for the retail brands to and CBD products to bludgeon into what we expect it to be. But there are plenty of processors out there with a whole lot of extract. I know that for a fact. So I don't necessarily believe just because another processor opens up, yes, from a farming perspective, that would probably allow the farmers to get their biomass reduced for them. But truthfully, one thing, not to throw a curveball in this, but I think over time, the way extracts look is going to change. Biomass reduction on fields and just different extraction technologies that are going to come out quickly. Some that even myself and my partners are working on. Just simple biomass reduction and can change the way that the product goes to market, and that can help farmers. Transporting hemp is really expensive, and drying hemp is really expensive and hard to do at a large level. So these bottlenecks are, tobacco, yeah, it's hard to dry, but they have a set market. They're there. If you could just take a hemp crop and somehow, I won't get into too many details yet, but reduce that biomass quickly and effectively, and then get it into a consumer product at a safe way, that will help, because there will be less of a bottleneck through storage. But again, it's also going to come onto CBD companies and growing their brands and having more of a need. We just got to get through this oversupply.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see the supply chain and green material. There's a bottleneck between green material and processing at all. Matter of fact, I think there's processes waiting for green material, so I don't see the bottleneck there at all. But I just want to jump ahead, Brett. There's another question on the chat about the contaminants found in hemp fiber and whether there's other industries, like you can keep downgrading the industries, so therefore you can classify inside of a product. So the highest level of cleanest hemp would be used here, and then the lower levels as you go would be used for other products. And I always answer that question with this. So you have to think, like, if the hemp fiber is bringing in a high lead content, and let's say, okay, hempcrete sounds like a great idea. You will be building a house with a high lead content. So what have you done, right? And that's just the simplest of terms that you can't always drive it down to the next lowest common denominator to a product that all of a sudden, is going to be 10 cents on the dollar per square meter of material or cubic meter of material. So that's often a question that gets asked of me a lot. And it's just very hard. I mean, you got this natural great product in carbon sequestration, and your new house that you just built from hempcrete is just is that carbon neutral, and yet you go to test the hemp and it has high lead content, right? That is a real life example, by the way. I can't name the parties involved, but it's true. And that you just went from one problem to the other and just passing it off. It just comes down to, and I don't, that to Brent and Jake's point, that classification, regulation, knowing, whoever that consumer is in the supply chain, it doesn't matter if it's a builder, or somebody buying a t-shirt, or somebody buying, or a drug company buying the CBD to mix with drug products, the classification it's too uneven and how we look at the industry from a classification standpoint, and especially on the fiber side, it's just, it's the Wild West. And, you know, I want to emphasize that, you know, these chemicals, these things that are unnatural, you know, they just show up. They show up in the product. And you don't, when you're taking the fiber off the stalk and retting it and processing it to try to get it to this material, you don't have all the regulation, all the regulatory and all the science in that process as you do on the CBD side of things, right? You know, because there's no margin for it, to be honest.
Sure.
Yeah.
Jake, there's a question for you in the chat box about cryogenic freezing and whether or not it was a good decision, and if you could elaborate on why and whether or not it degraded the quality of the product.
Well, I should say the product preservation standpoint, it's fantastic. You know, nitrogen isn't overly expensive, but to really truly do your own nitrogen-based setup, we went through a lot of nitrogen. And frankly, it goes back to biomass reduction, as I had said in the past, right? So from a perspective of if you're a craft cannabis grower and you want to store, or let's say you're a craft hemp grower and you found a very small niche market that's working for you, it's a great resource. If we're talking at a large scale, I would say that large scale freezing and storing is probably not going to be the best way forward. And the only reason I say that is you're going to have storage costs that are much higher from a frozen perspective. You know, it does expand a little bit. You know, you're not able to hammer mill a lot of this stuff down and get it reduce its sizing. So at a large scale, I don't think that that's the future necessarily, but at a smaller scale, I think it could be effective. I hope that answered your question. The product was good though. It did, for all intents and purposes, it worked the way we were hoping it would work, but it's not the way forward for a company like us.
Yeah, Brett, Karen Hunter had a question too about carbonization. Yeah, we're getting close on time here. So
yeah,
she makes a good, and I want to get to her.
Please do it, please.
But she makes a good point about, you know, adding it to asphalt. And as Mac would say, as we're building products for market, it really all comes down to, yeah, you could use it in asphalt and road beds and sequester it there, you know, but you know, you have to always answer the question,
but
why?
Nobody could pay for the road.
Yeah, but nobody could pay for the road, right? So all those things are important.
It's a major chicken and the egg. It's a major chicken and the egg question throughout the entire supply chain.
Correct. Yeah, and she also mentioned about contaminated hemp. I mean, just as a base, some advice. I mean, no one really wants to have contaminated hemp, but it can happen to farmers, and there's no actual easy answer to that. But some companies that are isolating out cannabinoids could maybe help you with that, because isolates do remove essentially any of the contaminations in it. So it is something, if you can find an avenue with your contaminated hemp, you obviously will be purchased at a much lower rate, but that just could be some advice for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Jake, you have to split the market there as to the hemp being the nutraceutical, or the hemp being the fiber side.
Right.
Yeah. Or is it you know, like traditional ag, where a farmer produces wheat or corn or soy, and they take that to a processor, and then it doesn't matter what they grew. The downstream use is what matters. And I think that's probably where we need to head with hemp and the rest of cannabis. Is it shouldn't matter what happens on the front end. It shouldn't matter why the farmer is growing it. The farmer produces it and then takes it to a processor, and they do with it what they may. I think that might make it a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's alignment with the company is the way that it's all going to end up going. You know.
So, and Brett, we do see real science and research in our early stages here around hemp proteins.
Yeah.
In the same way that, you know, you think about PLA and plastics and corn and all these things, and soy that have made plastic materials. We do here at Hemp Black Sea a vision of a very different world when it comes to hemp and using and isolating hemp proteins.
But we think it's very important to take the high road on the high value end uses instead of bringing it down to the very low end, lowest common denominator.
Right.
Really important.
Yeah.
So last question for the three of you. What advice do you have for Pennsylvania and the further development of the hemp industry here in the Commonwealth? Quick lightning round. That's a question from one of our from someone in our audience. But please, let's do it in our last few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about pulling together, experts on a panel to develop a scale of classification. That would set you apart in any way. I said that many, many times before, but yeah, I mean, you can ask as many hemp farmers to grow hemp. You could grow it on, 100,000 acres, especially on the fiber side. But if there's no way to classify it, and why don't you take the lead like North Carolina did 80, 90, 100 years ago in classifying cotton? It was just a remarkable set of standards for a state. And here we are with hemp in 2020 with no classification available, where we could become the experts there.
Yeah. From a CBD side of things, as I am on the committee steering PA Department of Agriculture currently, my big push is to get essentially regulation for brands and that they need to use, whether it's I've talked with Strathmire and potential people within the PA Department of Ags of PA seal of approvals and these can be given out to brands if they fit through from a retail perspective, if they fit through the regulatory guidelines. They're essentially then self-regulating, giving consumer confidence to the industry. That's giving essentially confidence to the major players in Pennsylvania. And it's giving farmers a list of brands that they'd like to associate with.
And we believe education and clinical research, hence our combination with Thomas Jefferson University, is really important in driving these things home to a consumer.
Well, that's some great insight. And with that, we're about to end the session. So I want to thank all of you for your participation in this panel. For the audience, let's give our speakers a round of virtual applause. Before we leave, I'd like to take a quick moment to recognize our top level sponsors and partners for this year's Pennsylvania Hemp Summit: Lancaster Farming, King's AgriSeed, Pennsylvania Agricultural Business Development Center, and Air Products. And for our panelists, in the session surveys, please fill out the survey for this session. Networking is a key feature of the summit, so please network virtually by using the chat and connecting with your business profile and visiting the forum. And we'll see everybody at 5 p.m. for tonight's virtual happy hour.
Thank you.
So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, as soon as I.
And I think with that, we're done.
Sweet. Well, thanks for moderating, man. Good job.
Yeah, thank you. Did we lose Jake? I'm sorry, you are Jake. Did we lose Mac and Mark?
Yeah, they may have just hung up.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize they're in the CBD side too.
Yes. Ecofiber has been making CBD products for quite a while, I believe.
So Ecofiber is the parent company of Tet Black?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into them. That's pretty cool.
There was a really great question in the chat box about the eligibility for Pennsylvania or other states to introduce flower into MMJ. And that's going to be a regulation that's going to have to be issued. And there are a couple states that are doing something like that. Illinois is one of them, and I think New York might be soon to follow with their new cannabinoid regulations. So it's certainly worth watching. We're not there yet in PA, but I would expect that it would happen. If it does happen, it would happen in 2021 when we get this rec program off the ground.
You think it'll happen in 2021, the rec program?
It would be great if it did. I mean, it would be great if it did. I think it would be great for many states if it did. I think Jersey is going to put so much pressure on.
Yeah, I agree.
Pennsylvania. Jersey is going to
agree.
put so much pressure on the tri-state area that it's going to, you know, everybody's going to have a rec program within the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
know,
it's
anyway.
a no-brainer at this point.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you know, it would make the most sense if there's some way to include farmers in that, because, you know, hemp's been great, but there's a lot more that can be done.
Oh, I 100% agree. It's going to be an interesting few years, man.
Yeah. Oh, it's been an interesting few years. See all these gray hairs? That's from the hemp
Yeah,
industry.
I was just going to say, if we survive the PTSD of the hemp market.
That's why I got an MMJ card.
Yeah.
I think we might still be on a hot mic, but with that, I think we're done here. So I think hot mics are okay. Yeah, no, it would make so much sense if and when we legalize rec and PA. But
yeah, well, we'll have to connect offline at some point. But
yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, this is awesome.
All right, everybody.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.